knows you got that. Okay, I'm gonna start my time in a sec. Are you ready, Judge?
Yep, good to go.
Okay, I don't know what's going on.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. I know this is only your third time what judging, I think. So I'm just gonna go over some framework for the debate. Just to start off, I guess, like not really an off-time roadmap, just like explaining the basic stuff, just so you're clear. I'm gonna first start off with going to be doing a two-world scenario, and then I'm gonna go into some observations. I'll tell you to flow when I'm speaking them. Those are pretty important. And then I'll be going into my contentions and everything. I'll be starting my time in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so first I would like to go over the weighing definition for this round, or how you will be voting on this, Judge. So basically, this is how you're going to be voting on the round, and its benefits for this Gen Z person or this Gen Z individual who is going to be making the decision. That is what this house is. We're just thinking as a Gen Z person who would be making the decision for the rest of their life to lead a life heavily prioritizing flexibility and keeping options over prioritizing long-term commitments. So that's what we are saying. The world today that we live in is full of pathways, and this is pretty obvious. Every single decision that you make in your life is just kind of a decision that is going to affect you for the rest of your life often. Just with the grades you make in class, every little thing in your life is just another pathway. And honestly, there's no way to predict where life is going to take you next. And this is for everyone, not just our generation. Any day, something bad can happen and ruin your chances at everything. Any day, I don't know, the world could end. There's always the possibility of something going wrong. And this is why it's just best to keep, just for your own happiness, to keep the life full of options and many pathways that you can go down. Restraining yourself to anything closes every other door in that category. Now, Judge, I'm about to say some observations, and these are very, very, very important that you write these down. Observation 1, preference does not mean inability to commit to anything else. So we're basically just saying, just because you prefer to prioritize flexibility and all that other stuff, does not mean you cannot, it doesn't mean that you can't actually commit to something. It just means that you prefer to keep things flexible and keep options open. Observation 2, and it's very important that you write this down, Judge. We're just talking about one person. We're not talking about the global average. We're just talking about this one Gen Z individual who is going to be making this decision. Please keep those written down because this is going to be very important for later in the round. Contention 1, keeping options open promotes new ideas and understanding of the world. The more you live, the more experiences there are to be had. The earlier you box yourself in to just one or to just a couple different things that you can experience for the rest of your life, it's just going to be boxing you out it's going to be boxing you further and further in. For example, for the South Korean test, which is the most important exam of their life, and how people this is kind of an example of like a forced box. But all these people are basically forced to this test is very important, and it basically decides where they're going to be for the rest of their life. And when they take this test, it is known that suicide rates spike in South Korea hugely, just because all these people are committed to something and there's no way that they can get out of it. This is a very unique example, but this can be applied to many different things in life. For example, if you get stuck into a sport that you're not good at a very young age, and you commit to something and you kind of realize, maybe I'm not as good at this as I thought, or maybe other people are a little bit better than me. You've already so far into committed things, you don't have that flexibility to keep options open, and you're kind of now stuck in something and you can't do anything, and you just end up kind of having to give up because you're stuck in something you're not good at and you don't like, and there's no flexibility, and it feels like everything's going wrong. And this is going to lead me straight into my contention 2. Extreme commitments lead to unhappiness. And I stand by this. If you just commit to something, especially at a young age, and this is why we're talking about a Gen Z person in this scenario, because we're talking about somebody committing to something very extreme at a very young age, it can just lead to very extreme unhappiness. If you devote yourself to something and you spend all your time on doing something, over and over and over again, you might end up actually, and then let's just say it leads to burnout. That's basically what I'm saying. You're going to get yourself burned out. If you do the same thing over and over and over again, which is most of the time what a commitment is, you're going to get yourself burned out. And this is a huge problem, because if you're burned out of the only thing that you know how to do, and you don't actually have all these other options, and you don't know that there's other things in life that you might be able to do instead of the one thing you've been committing yourself to, then you just kind of have to give up, and there's no other options in life. It's very hard to explain this stuff without an example, so I'm just going to try to frame this the best way I could. If the only thing you have in life is this one commitment that you've been doing, for example, let's just say the one thing you do in life is skateboarding, and that's the one thing you do, and all you do is you're trying to really prioritize just getting good at this, and you don't really have the flexibility and the options of other commitments and other different things that you can do, and you're sort of just putting yourself in this one scenario, and then you suddenly fall on your skateboard and you get hurt, then there's nothing else you can do. I'm sorry, my file just crashed. I'm gonna have to use another file. So I'm gonna just go over to a different time. I'm not gonna restart my timer. I'm just gonna try to reset my file. I'm sorry, guys.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just gonna continue off the top of my head. I'm sorry. So basically, so what the impacts of this are suicide, depression, anxiety, stress. All of these things come from commitments that you make when you're not ready to. And if I'm going to have to start a commitment, it would be nice to always have other options and always prioritize flexibility. I can get very good at debate, and I can do debate all the time, but I always have to keep my other options open, because if debate for some reason isn't going to work out for me, or something happens that stops debate from being something I can access in my day-to-day life, I wouldn't want it to ruin my life or heavily affect it. And it's proven time and time again that these things do affect it. If you commit your life to one thing, it leads to monotony, it leads to obsession with something. And if that doesn't work out, then your life is kind of effectively over. If you can keep your options open, it means that you can still manage to get very good at things, and you can end up becoming a lot more experienced of an individual. You can get very good at things, so then when you end up going into your real world and you go into real life scenarios, you're good. You have a diverse traits of just being good at whatever you do. And if you just commit to one thing, then you end up kind of then it can lead to a lot of the impacts that we've said, just depression and anxiety if that doesn't work out. I think that is my time. Thank you, Judge. I urge a vote for government.
Well, that was pretty good.
Oh, wait.
You don't lock your phone. Yeah, okay. Sorry, we're just resetting the timer.
There you go.
Okay, so for a quick off-time roadmap. Hello, my name is Carson Zenoria. My partner's name is Hanmei Zen, and today will be the negation side of this resolution. And in this first negative speech, I'll first go over our two contentions, and then I will go into some responses to their contentions. And you may start my time in 3, 2, 1. So our first contention is so our first let me start with some definitions. So commitment and flexibility, yeah, they talked about flexibility not meaning you fully can't, or prioritizing doesn't mean inability to commit to long-term stuff, but it's many of the examples, I'll get into it later, but many of the examples that they stated, we think are pretty important things that we should prioritize as long-term commitment things. So our first contention is just generally not prioritizing commitment and what it implies. So prioritizing long-term commitments means settling down and generally traveling less. So that includes buying a house and stuff, being willing to settle down and potentially have a family, build relationships within your community and stuff. And that's one of the most important parts of general commitment. Travel is often very costly and decreases the capital that one can spend on where they could have used that capital on stuff that they make in their own community. And so
What do you mean by travel?
It's the difference between flexibility and commitment. Okay, so commitment obviously being able to settle down within a house versus flexibility just being the opposite of that, being maybe not like moving around very often, but like it's the difference of being in an apartment versus being in a house or being in your own house. And so along with this, we go into like businesses getting regular customers, and like if there is no like sense of commitment, there will be economic instability. And many employers expect although not an indefinite commitment, they expect a long-term commitment, and that is one of the most important parts of like being able to commit to long-term things. Another aspect is like the general improvement in like fertility rate, being willing to settle down within a family. And this means settling down and spending more time raising your children. And one of our main examples of this is the fertility rate in Asia, and how like countries like Korea and China are currently having fertility issues, and like being flexible is part of the reason why they're currently having fertility issues. And our fourth sub point is like generally building community within where you stay. So the local community is always built on the people who live there, and that's often why neighborhoods are so friendly and so safe. Because your local neighborhood is where you know people, and it increases trust and familiarity. So for our links, unless settling down is prioritized, people will always seek to do new stuff, and they won't be able to commit to like we said, the jobs, the housing, the family that is necessary for a stable society. And this leads to of course, if you're unable to create a stable job, a stable income, it'll lead to lower quality of life, potentially financial strain, and other stuff that comes with financial strain. For our second contention, we go to relationships. And once again, we'd like to highlight the fact that jobs are mostly built on long-term commitments and your relationship with your employer. And these jobs are often inflexible and built for people who are committed to staying in one place and working in one job for extended periods of time. And without a certain amount of predictability within business, there could be significant fluctuations in workforce and overall productivity, leading to like factories and manufacturing plants just being shut down because they can't find any consistency. They need consistency for a stable economy. And another point is relationships with like friends. In the motion, it speaks of flexibility within people. Like typically good friends are very long-term and they go way back, but without commitments to friends or like relationships with other people, with peers, you don't get the same level of closeness, dependability, and reliability, and not the same intimate level of friendship.
Point of clarification. Sorry, this is just out of a little confusion. Is this contention 2 still?
Yeah, this is still contention 2.
Yeah.
And so it also furthers to romantic relationships, and as we mentioned in contention 1, the fertility rate decline that comes with that, because like marriage is a very important commitment, and like being able to settle down and have a family is, as I said, with the fertility rate issues, it's very, very important. And if people aren't willing to have commitments, then they are less likely to get hired, and there will be workforce shortage, there will be productivity and fluctuation, and just generally the economy will become unstable, leading to lower quality of life. And the economy on the decline will degrade our current society. And now to go on to our refutations. So in their first little segment, they were talking about how there's no way to really predict how life is going to take you, and there's always possibilities of things going wrong, but a lot of them a lot of the examples that they gave were like very specific and very unlikely examples, because there has to be a certain amount of predictability in the world. And although there's no way we can, nuclear war could happen tomorrow, but the likelihood of that happening is very, very slim. So we have to be able to commit and like see, we have to have a certain amount of predictability in our life, basically. And for their observation too about it's just one person and not the entire world, we think this is a very unreasonable observation, because if everyone in the world, if everyone was rational in the same way this debate should be rational, then everyone should be able to see the same lines that we are drawing. Everyone should see that either commitment or flexibility is better. And in this case, flexibility in the entire world will disrupt the economy and society in many, many ways, whereas commitment, which many institutions that are currently in place are founded on. In their second contention, or in their first contention, they were talking about like the Korean test and like commitment to sports. But for specifically the Korean test, although yes, the suicide spike, it's terrible. It's terrible. But the only way, what they're implying is that we shouldn't have long-term education. What they're implying is that the commitment to education isn't important, which we know that education is extremely important, and to disallow education or to allow education to be optional is very counterproductive. It degrades our society. And they talked about extreme commitments lead to unhappiness, but as we said, many things require commitment, and that's why we firmly believe you should vote the neg side. Thank you.
Okay. Hello, Judge. My name is Graham Savage, as the second speaker of the government, and give me a second to start my time and get my stopwatch ready. Okay. I'm going to be starting my time in 3, 2, 1, now. Judge, I'd like to start off by restating the definition of this. The opposition has stated multiple times, described the Gen Z person as the entire world. And that is obviously just not what the motion says. We can't, this is not up to debate. This House, as an average Gen Z person in a developed country, that is not multiple people, that is a single person. Average Gen Z person, that is singular, that is not plural. We're talking about one specific person making their way through life, not what would happen to the entire world if the entire world functioned like this. I'm on GovSheet right now defending some of the things the opposition stated. They mentioned that about what we said about the Korean test, that we are arguing against long-term school as a whole, which we have never stated. I don't know where they got that idea from, but it is obviously untrue. We are not arguing against long-term school as a whole. We are arguing about being too locked into one specific thing and not being well-rounded and committing too much to something. They also mentioned something about school being optional, which is a completely insane idea that we have not brought up. I don't know where they got that idea from, and that is.
It's like they implicated.
That is nothing that we said that the opposition just made up. Your entire life shouldn't depend on one thing, which is what we are debating on. What we really are debating, which the opposition seems to have lost the grasp on, is if one specific Gen Z person making their way through life, what they should do, whether they should remain flexible or try to prioritize long-term commitments from the beginning. They also, moving on to OpSheet right now, in their first contention, they talked about how long-term commitment can build relationships, but this is non-unique. This is not unique to their case. You can build relationships and still not have like your life commitment to them. You can have a girlfriend or have a boyfriend or have a significant other and have friends, and it's not like the center of your life. It's not the sun you revolve around.
You just have to reference that light.
You can have all this, but you can still know, like, hey, your life can't like devolve if something should happen, because something always can happen. you want your life to be flexible, but you can still have relationships. They also talk about being willing
It's
to
like
settle
having a
down.
fake
But I'd like to
relationship.
point out we're talking about a Gen Z person here. The entirety of the Gen Z is generation is still relatively young. Very few of us have settled down, and it's a very I would say bad point because settling down when you're in your teens or 20s is something that can be done, but it's obviously I think is a bad idea until your later 20s or 30s. And in their second tension about relationships, they talked more about one Gen Z individual about how the Gen Z we were talking about Gen Z as a whole, which is not the motion. You can still have like the average amount of commitment while maintaining flexibility. And they also talked a lot about fertility issues, and this is kind of funny to me because they talked about how our thinking about the Korean test was very specific, but fertility issues in Korea and China, I believe, were the two countries I mentioned, are an extremely specific example that I think don't have much to do with people not being willing to settle down and not being willing to be flexible, because fertility issues are not an issue caused by a generation that is mostly in their young 20s and teens. That is not an issue caused by them unless the opposition advocates for teenage pregnancy, which I think they should not be doing. These fertility issues are an extremely specific and kind of random example, and they don't mean much in this case. Our three observations outweigh their whole case because all of their points weigh on their fertility issues, their relationship issues, and the thing they said about work. But none of these things matter to someone who is the age Gen Z currently is, into a specific singular individual, which is what the motion is. This person has a preference to be flexible, but it doesn't mean they can't commit to something that matters to them. Like for me, I do a few extracurriculars, but that doesn't. But if let's say something happened, I injured myself and I couldn't do track anymore, that doesn't mean that like my life falls apart. Like it's but I'm still committed to it. I've been doing it for years, but it's not the end of the world if something happens then. This is what we're talking about. It's about being flexible in the sense that you're well-rounded, in the sense that like it wouldn't be the end of the world, while also maintaining the ability of being able to stick to something for purpose in the future.
We have to okay.
We outweigh them on this. And in our second observation, I'd just like to restate because the opposition has mentioned this multiple times.
We
were
have to
talking
talk
one
about how
singular
like
Gen
it's
Z
unfair
person,
that
not
they're
everyone
okay. So we're
With
supposed to be weighing flexibility
Thank you,
versus
and I urge the
commitment.
government vote.
Okay, we have to. They're like arguing that they can still commit while being flexible, which is like it's unfair. I don't know.
Just an unfair overgeneralization.
Yeah, it's an overgeneralization.
Oh wait.
Okay.
Let me get my timer. Okay. So hello, my name is Hanmei, and so I'll just be like rebutting against the Gov's rebuttal and their contentions, and then I'll go ahead and restate our contentions. Yeah, and then Judge, you can start the timer in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so first of all, your first claim about how the world is like unpredictable and stuff, that just highlights the need for even more stability, so that just in case if something goes wrong, you always have things to fall back on, right? And then as for your definition about like having this be just in one singular person and not the population, average Gen Z people behave similarly, and there are a lot of young people, Gen Z people right now, that are making these decisions. So what one person would do, the rest of the population would very likely also incline towards.
POI?
Yeah?
Are you saying that if one random Gen Z person decided to prioritize flexibility in their life, you think the rest of Gen Z would follow?
We're saying that in the motion, since it says average, we're generalizing that average means like the majority of Gen Z people or the average amount of Gen Z people would also support this.
Like, for example, you know that older generations, they tend to prioritize commitments. So then, like, if like an average like older person would prioritize commitments, so it would make sense to reason that most of the old people would also go with commitments, you know, that kind of thing. But yeah, and then your claim on how friends and relationships can still continue in flexibility, you need a commitment for a strong relationship, or else it's going to be weak. And then especially in times of unpredictability, like how you guys even said the world is unpredictable right now, you always need someone dependable and close to you who you trust to fall back on. And that kind of relationship, that kind of trust just doesn't build when you don't make any long-term commitments, because it's just going to be a weak relationship. Yeah. And also, your example on the test is just a bad example. And then also on the fertility issues that you guys mentioned, people in China and Korea and also Japan, generally, they're not settling down, which leads to the fertility issue. And Gen Z is also following this trend. And because Gen Z is the next up-and-coming adult generation, if they prioritize non-commitment, then that means that these problems will continue. And then right now, government, and it's causing a lot of issues. Like, you need a good worker to elderly ratio so that your economy can still be healthy and you can still take care of the elderly. But then now in this case, the ratio is like really skewed. There is less workers per elderly to take care of, which places more strain on young people and worsens the financial situation and all of that, which would decrease everyone's quality of life and greatly stress out young people, which would also lead to like anxiety, depression, other mental health issues too. Yeah, and then you guys also mentioned how right now Gen Z is still relatively young, and that like all of those things in the future, they don't matter to these young people right now. Like they don't need to commit right now, but current commitments do matter right now, like for young people, because they will affect future commitments. And like in the future, if you want to settle down, well, your past decisions about committing or not committing will affect that. Like you know how on job resumes where like they see your past experience, if they see that you're like job hopping like every like 3 months or something, and then they're gonna think that you are not committed and like you won't commit, and then they won't hire you, that kind of thing. So yeah, it really, and also if you aren't like currently, like for young people in the Gen Z age, if they don't start like committing, if they don't start prioritizing committing, and then if they do want to commit in the future, it also sets a very bad foundation, because if you commit right now, there is like you could like start having a stable life and job and income, and you can start like building up your life, you know, so that later if you do want to like commit to other things or do something else, you'll be more prepared, and then you just generally have more things to fall back on. So it's also a lot safer for life.
You have to talk about how them stating that flexibility and they can still be flexible.
Oh yeah, and also your statement. I'm sorry. Oh yeah.
I just think like sorry. This is just like a rule thing. Like, it's fine. I know it's your first term, but you're just not allowed to like whisper to each other in speech.
Sorry. But also your statement about how you can be flexible and still commit, that is kind of an unfair thing to say, because like it kind of defeats the whole point of the topic, where you're like arguing like commitment versus flexibility and not having like 2 in 1. So yeah. Anyways, I'll go back to our contentions. So basically, if you just like settle down and start like having a family, you know, a stable life, travel is costly, and also you can so that'll also cost you. and then later in life you'll have less capital. And then businesses also need like regular customers. So if there is no commitment, then it's going to be very fickle, and then they'll also struggle. There'll be economic issues in general. And also, if you commit like to marriage and long-term relationships, or like settling down, having a family, that also solves a lot of the fertility rate issues, which causes economic issues and places a great amount of stress on young people and the future generations. And then also, if you settle down and stay somewhere to live, you also have a dependable community, because like you would know the people around you a lot better than random strangers who you just moved in with or something like that. So then there would be more trust and familiarity and safety, and then you guys also like help each other on things too. And then also relationships, like jobs, relationship with your employer and coworkers, friends, family, romantic partner, all of that. And they require long-term commitments. Like, you can't just date someone for 2 weeks and then say, never mind. Like, you have to, like, if you actually want a strong relationship, you have to stay with that person for an extended period of time. And then from that, you could get like more happiness, more stability, someone to rely on, and generally just like decreases like your stress in life and increase your quality of life for both a romantic partner and a platonic partner. And also jobs typically require you to like they typically require you to be like less flexible. And it's more of a long-term thing. Like, you gotta stay working in that job, because like if people don't, and then like people are just arbitrarily quitting or entering, it's very unstable for the employer, and then it makes it really hard to plan things out in the future and all of that. And also, you don't get a stable source of income, which also leads to financial instability. So for these reasons, Judge, please vote for the neg side.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Pull up a 4-minute timer.
Okay.
It's my turn.
Oh shit, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so once again, thank you for your time. My name is Carson. This will be our third and last negation speech for this resolution. And I'll go over, first I'll go over some like very important parts of why the debate has to be formatted in a certain way. And then I'll go over our rebuttals and contentions, and I'll give you a 2-world scenario of why you should vote the negation side. And you may start my time in 3, 2, 1. So once again, we need to stress this. An average Gen Z person, although it is not the population, an average Gen Z person is expected to behave similarly, and like a rational like average Gen Z person should be able to draw the same lines that we are drawing in this scenario. And I know they keep telling us that prioritizing flexibility doesn't mean complete removal of long-term commitment, but we ask, where do we draw the line between like complete flexibility, complete commitment, and then like prioritizing one over the other? Because in many of these cases, like for example the education one, we do need long-term education, and we also do need fertility rates, and we also do need jobs. So where do we draw the line between those two, between all of these, and like the difference between commitment and flexibility? And so once again, as we've stated, you need strong commitment, and like flexibility with friends, as it states, flexibility with people, places, and vocations. Flexibility with people. You can't create good, strong, healthy relationships, dependable relationships, if you want to be flexible. That's just contradictory. And as my partner has stated, Gen Z is the next upcoming adult generation, and the problems of fertility that we have already been having will only be exemplified if the Gen Z generation, the new generation that will be ruling the world, that will be controlling all our nations, chooses to prioritize non-commitment. These problems will only be exemplified, and that's what we want to prevent. And current commitments often do affect long-term in the future. For example, like the programs you decide to enroll in high school can affect what college, what major you want to do in college. And so in this two-world scenario, we're really trying to compare like a reasonable amount of flexibility versus a reasonable amount of commitment. Of course, we don't want a skateboarder who gets injured to just sit there for the rest of his life because he can't skateboard anymore. But simultaneously, you can't have a stable job, you can't you can't stop the fertility problems, you can't have strong relationships without these long-term commitments that we speak of. And so in a world where we prioritize flexibility over commitment, and where this Gen Z person and the average Gen Z people value flexibility over commitment, we'll see the influx in job and workforce, and we'll see the influx in in fertility rates. We'll see all of these unstable, unpredictable things that will lead to economic instability and like society being unstable, being unpredictable, versus in a committed world, our current status quo world, where people have to commit to jobs, where people do commit to families. We, at least in the US, we're seeing like stable incomes, we're seeing better quality of life, we're seeing stronger relationships. And that's what we want to value. We want to value the stability and predictability in strong, dependable relationships, good jobs, and like the ability to maintain these jobs and income, and the ability, what was the fertility rate. And that's why we believe that you should vote the next side in this argument. Thank you, Judge.
Okay, Judge?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Oh, there you go. Okay, making sure.
2 minutes?
I'm just gonna go over,
5
I'm just
minutes.
gonna go over some topic case right now before I actually go into my arguments. I'm just gonna go over first some framework just to clear up some confusion with the debate and just kind of go over the debate, and then I'm gonna go deeper in and I'm trying to actually explain the individual points that are made during this debate. Yeah, I'll also be talking a lot about the 3 observations I made in the beginning of the round that we wrote down.
That's good.
Okay, I'll be starting my time in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so first I would like to talk about just how debate works. And our 3 observations. The motion says this House, as an average Gen Z person in a developed country, would leave a life, blah, 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 blah. This House, as an average Gen Z person, is talking about as an individual, an individual. That's what it's trying to say. If it was trying to talk about something as like Gen Z as a whole, it would say this House as Gen Z would try to leave a life prioritizing flexibility. It's talking about specifically trying to talk about an individual and just trying to talk about one person. This House as an average Gen Z person basically means we're just a Gen Z person looking forward and we're deciding how we should choose our life. This is also why we keep on talking about a lot of their points. They just can't really be considered during this round just because the way that they're framed is you're talking about Gen Z as a whole, and they don't actually really talk about Gen Z as an individual. So like an average, just one Gen Z person or one person deciding what to do in their life. This just kind of means that a lot of these points that were made during the round can't really be considered. I also heard a lot, I kind of like thought that this might happen. I made the observation in the very beginning. I pointed out the POI. I've given them plenty of time to notice that, but they didn't change it. And contention, and our contention 1, keeping option open and promoting new ideas. I don't really think, I think the debate is kind of past this point at this point. We aren't really arguing about the actual points that were made. because we're kind of talking about just like what is going on with the framework of this debate, and they would win if we're talking about debate as Gen Z as a whole, but we're not. We're talking about Gen Z as an individual and just one Gen Z person. That also kind of leads us to contention 2, which was kind of maybe forgotten about in this round, which was that extreme commitments can lead to unhappiness. And the reason it wasn't really mentioned was, I think, partly just due because they never responded to it, which makes it really hard for us to really know how to weigh this and what to put it against, because a lot of their points have been made on talking about the bigger problem and having a bigger issue instead of really talking about Gen Z as an individual. They're kind of getting out of the scale of this debate, and they don't really, and I don't think we've been talking too much as an individual. I'm really not trying just to like framework them out of the debate. I just hope that this is clear to you, because it's pretty apparent to us.
Yeah, he is.
They never did respond to the extreme commitments lead to unhappiness, and like in debate, usually when every point has to be refuted or contested in some way, and if you fail to contest a point, it usually just the judge usually just has to accept it as true, and therefore my unresponded to contention 2 is a lot more important than it might seem, and should end up winning us the debate, just because it was never officially responded to with just, if you devote yourself to something really hard. I gave a lot of warranting. I gave the impacts of suicide, depression, and anxiety for this individual who is trying to make a commit, who's trying to keep things flexible. So I just want to go back to the very framework of the debate. The very person of this debate. We're talking about one individual who's trying to live a life and is wondering whether he should just be flexible in his life and keep options open, or whether he should have long-term commitments and really just go straight into the hunk of it and just go after one thing. Just because this was we never actually really got to talk too much about this individual, it's very hard for us to know how to win, to explain this debate and how to win this debate, because like the example we gave, the suicide rate spike in South Korea after the test, that was just a single point trying to prove how dangerous it is to kind of make your entire life depend on one thing. Then I feel like we never were really like the response was usually kind of like very specific, but they did state that this does happen. It's tragic, and they admitted that the suicide rates do spike in South Korea after the test. If they are accepting that, okay, it is good that it is just worth the cost that these people are dying, even if it means, just because it means we're getting like better test scores. I was a little confused by the response here, so I hope I'm not disrespecting it. And I want to go over to one more thing on the round 3, just to go over why you don't have anything to vote for on their side, because contention 2, relationships, productivity, there was a lot of generalizations here, and they kept on talking about as a whole. They never talked about individuals. And then on their contention 1, long-term
I'm sorry,
commitment,
I think you're going a little over.
Responded to this during the first one. Hello? Yeah?
I think you're going a little over.
I was in 509. That was, you have 30 seconds of grace period. Yeah, that was my speech, but, yeah, okay. Thank you, Judge. It's up to you. Okay.
Thank you so much. Do you guys mind giving me 5 minutes or so that I can collect my notes?